Welcome back to the Exact Bliss, part of the Zero Bliss podcast family. I'm your host, Charles McDonald, here with Yahoo Sports, Frank Schwab. Frank, how's your offseason going, man?
It's going good. Got a little time off, but then, I don't know, today just seemed different to me because NBA Finals ended last night. You know, I love basketball, but that part's over now. We don't get much basketball. And also my preview series started this morning with number 32 Carolina Panthers, which to me personally, I always feel like that's kind of the ramp up to the season. Like, okay, now we're counting down teams. When we get to number one, it'll be the Hall of Fame games. So something seemed different about it today. It seemed like the offseason is not even close to being over, but it felt a little bit over. Like you're getting your school supplies ready for the first day of school. Like you're going to the Sears to buy some clothes for the first day back in my day with third grade or whatever. So it just felt a little bit like the offseason is ending today for those reasons.
The school supplies bit, I think, is apt because now it's like, all right, because I think today is when teams started announcing like what day training camp they're going to start, like when rookies report, when veterans report, and that's when it starts to get kind of real to me. It's like, oh, okay.
Time's running out, man. If you want to hit the beach, if you want to take a vacation, you better squeeze it in now because before long,
you got
we'll be talking
about 3 weeks to make some plans and execute them for the rest of the summer before this gets moving back in the direction where we get to watch all these games that we love. As we usually do, we're going to start off with some news. It's the week after minicamp, so there's not much going on this week. It's not a whole lot of NFL news at this part of the calendar, but thankfully, a couple wide receivers have blessed us with a couple of things to talk about. The Bengals announced that wide receiver T. Higgins, who has been in the news with them a lot over the past year for just trying to figure out like what's next on his career. He's obviously an excellent wide receiver. His contract status with the Bengals is in flux for the future, and he was given the franchise tag. He signed it. And what I thought was interesting was the Bengals announced it as a 1-year contract extension, which is like technically right. But when you're describing it like that, I instantly go, what's next there? Like, are you gone? It kind of feels like they were just kind of trying to placate people who were maybe concerned about T getting a contract extension, but I guess a 1-year deal on the franchise tag is technically a contract extension. I just think when you frame it like that, it starts to look a little bit weird.
Let me ask you something. This is the first time I've thought about this. So I haven't had much time to research it or anything. If they did it in a way that it is a 1-year contract extension, like it's not just a franchise tag, does that mean the deadline for negotiating a long-term deal changes? Because teams, for people who don't know, there is a deadline. I believe it's sometime in July, mid-July, where if you pass that deadline, you cannot negotiate a long-term deal with a franchise tag guy. But a guy in a 1-year contract extension, like, why not? Like, I don't see why they couldn't still keep talking to T. Higgins if that's what they want to do. I don't think either of us thinks T. Higgins is going to be back with the Bengals in 2025, but you also never know. Like, I mean, the salary cap keeps rising. The Bengals don't want to lose one of their really, really good young talents. Maybe this changes. I don't know. I didn't look enough into the kind of semantics of why they called it a 1-year contract extension versus signing the franchise tag. But yes, there's a reason why NFL teams do stuff like that and use the words they do. And there had to be some reason that they discussed it in this way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with T. And I feel about this way with Brandon Aiyuk to a lesser degree. But to me, the fact that T doesn't have a long-term deal done already probably means he's not going to be back for next year. And maybe this is going to be one last run with it. Hey, Burrow, hopefully he can stay healthy. We load up on offensive line talent. We got the skilled players. Let's just see what happens in 2024. You never know. Maybe you get hot, you win a Super Bowl. But with how the wide receiver contracts are getting handed out recently and how much money those are costing, T. Higgins' contract for the future is only getting more expensive by the day. And with every player that signs another deal. Like, if you're T. Higgins, you're looking at Devonta Smith getting $25 million a year. That seems like that should be pretty attainable for where you are in your career. And if you're the Bengals, like, I don't blame them if they're like, man, we got Chase coming up. That's a lot of money at wide receiver.
Justin Jefferson money.
Right. Chase is going to get Justin Jefferson money. And so you're going to pay like Justin Jefferson money and Devonta Smith money on the same team. I think that's a fair question for them to want to parse out. But if not, dude, just trade him. Like go get the first round picks now. Just rip the Band-Aid off, keep them moving a year early. Because I think what we've learned over this century of football since the 2000s started, it's never a bad idea for a team to like act on a plan a year early. Just trying to get the picks, trying to get out of a bad contract, what have you. So I do think it'll be interesting to see what happens next offseason, but that's probably getting a little bit ahead of ourselves because we haven't even gotten the training camp yet this year.
I don't mind the Bengals' approach here and what seems to be the 49ers' approach. We'll talk about Brandon Aiyuk in a second, but first with the Bengals of just saying, hey, let's play this out and see what happens. Like I get where you're coming from about, and if some team offered multiple first-round picks or whatever for T. Higgins, that ain't happening. But if some team just blew you away with an offer, sure, okay, fine, whatever. But I think back to A.J. Brown and the Titans. Titans traded A.J. Brown away to the Eagles, obviously. They didn't understand where the receiver market was going. Made a huge, huge mistake. What did they get back? They got a first-round pick, which they used on Treylon Burks, who might not even be on the roster come week one. And I look at that and I say, well, what's the value of just saying, you know what? We're getting Joe Burrow back. We still have Chase. We still have UT. We almost won a Super Bowl a few years ago. Let's just run it back and see what happens. We'll worry about the future in the future. Maybe we lose T. Higgins, but you're going to get a comp pick back anyway. So, yes, you're losing a little bit not trading T. Higgins now. If you have no plans to sign him to a long-term deal, and I assume they're going to keep talking. Like, why not? Like, he's in the building. But if you have no desire to sign him to 2025 and beyond, there still is a value in, hey, it's right now, it's 2024. Let's make a run at this thing and see what happens. I'm fine with it. I actually am. I even if you don't trade T. Higgins and he walks and he signs some gargantuan deal with the Jaguars or whoever's going to sign him, I think it's okay to just say, let's see what happens this year. Maybe you win a Super Bowl, maybe you don't, but you took your shot. I don't mind not trading him, even if you absolutely are sure you're not going to be re-signing him to a long-term deal.
Yeah, I think either way you could play it is valid. It's just my spidey sense started tingling when they said 1 year or a 1 year contract extension. I was like,
It was weird. Yeah, it was unusual. And I'm not sure why. I haven't, again, we'll get off this podcast. I might look it up a little bit. I should have beforehand, but I'm writing these previews.
It's June. It's June.
It's June. It's June. We got time. We got time.
Well, where Brandon Aiyuk is like actually kind of weird because when this news first dropped, I didn't watch the video. At first, I kind of skimmed the headline because I was doing something else. And at first, I read it as like Jaden Daniels had posted a conversation he had with Brandon Aiyuk on TikTok. And, like it had gotten out where Brandon said to Jaden on the phone that the 49ers don't want me. Which, I mean, it makes sense that they have a relationship. They played together at Arizona State, which is funny because Brandon's been in the NFL for quite some time now. Enough to, about to get a second deal and Jaden's just not getting drafted. The new college football rules are kind of in display right there. But it was actually Brandon Aiyuk's TikTok account on a call with Jaden Daniels where Brandon said that the 49ers didn't want him anymore to Jaden Daniels. That's pretty interesting. To me, that goes even like a little bit further than like a negotiation tactic. To me, it sounds like he like actually has his feelings hurt over these contract negotiations, which is like probably understandable. He's been one of their best players over the past few years. He's developed into like, I think, a real deal number one wide receiver. And the 49ers, like they're kind of a spot where you got so many good players, you're going to have to make some tough decisions once it's time for everybody to get paid. And now Brandon Aiyuk, with a month left until training camp, doesn't have a long-term deal with the 49ers locked up. And it kind of doesn't really seem like there's any clarity on his future. I know before the draft, there was some buzz that like, oh, maybe the Jaguars could trade the 17th pick for Brandon Aiyuk. Obviously, that didn't happen. That was 2 months ago, and there hasn't really been any update. And now we get this from Aiyuk himself saying that the 49ers don't want him there anymore, which I'm assuming it has to be contract related because in a vacuum, they should love to have him. They kind of need him on their offense, but this is a salary cap sport.
Yeah, I highly doubt that like John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan called up Brandon Aiyuk and said, we don't really want you anymore. Like that just doesn't make any sense. I think Brandon is just, like you said, his feelings are probably hurt that he hasn't got the long-term extension, but probably a $30 million a year receiver in that range anyway. He's
Definitely
played to that level. Like if JJ's worth 35, then Brandon's got to be, he's probably looking at Devontae Smith saying, I'm better than Devontae Smith. So let's cut the difference and make it 30. Whereas the 49ers can't afford that right now. And they drafted Ricky Pearsall. So I think that the 49ers are probably looking at this as, hey, if some team wants to bowl us over with an offer, cool. But like the Bengals, the 49ers should feel like we could win a Super Bowl this year. We have the best team in football. Like they should feel that way anyway. Whether it's true or not, we'll find out. But if I was the 49ers, I'd say, look, Brandon, what you gonna do? Sit at home? You gonna tank your season? You kind of got to play with us. And if you get paid next offseason, we'll wish you well. But let's try to win a Super Bowl first. You'll figure out your future after that. Brandon Aiyuk is not going to do himself any favors by kind of not playing well. But you do worry about, what if a guy comes in and he is not happy? Is he really going to play through a minor hamstring injury from weeks 9 through 12? Like stuff like that. I'm not trying to question Brandon Ayuk's professionalism, but it's harder when you don't have that. This has happened before. Like when you don't have that long-term contract, when your team hasn't given you that kind of comfortability with your contract, you know, things happen. You're not a happy employee. So I think this is a little more complicated than T. Higgins, although it's very, very similar. But again, if I'm the 49ers, I just say, you know what? We're chasing the Super Bowl. If you're unhappy, we're sorry, but this is the business. Go ball out, help us win a title. You'll get paid. You might get paid even more than that $30 million if you have a big, big season, if he repeats what he did last year. So, but I don't take much out of this social media. Like, I mean, the TikTok video, whatever. Right, I just think Brandon Aiyuk is unhappy with it all. I think we agree on that. But what happens next? It is fascinating because you can make the case 49ers should trade him, because I think Brandon Aiyuk has a ton of trade value at this point. I mean, we talked about, Jaden Daniels. Like the Commanders have the cap room to do this. Like they were trading away players last year, so why not use some of that draft capital to get one back, get a superstar? But I don't know. I just feel like this has to end with Brandon Aiyuk playing for the San Francisco 49ers this season, probably not getting re-signed, and then we'll see how he produces being kind of an unhappy camper. Yeah,
this has floated the idea of like, obviously, since given the nature of the video, could the Commanders trade for Brandon Aiyuk? I'll say this. If I'm the 49ers, yeah, you could take him, because if I can get 2 first-round picks from the team that just picked number 2 overall, yeah, we're definitely about to try and see what happens there. Because the thing with Washington is, even if you're excited about the future, this is still a multi-year thing. I mean, they were one of the worst teams in the league for a reason last year. They're going through a huge shift of talent on defense, rookie quarterback. I mean, there's pretty reasonable expectations where this could not look pretty year one, just given on where they're starting. And for that reason, if I was the Commanders, I don't think they're in a spot where they can afford to pair, to give away like potentially like top 10 picks, multiple top 10 picks for Brandon Aiyuk. It's like, I think we're probably not using
the contract.
And the contract too. Like we're probably not using our resources to the best of our abilities. And also, they have some guys that they're trying to figure out, like Jahan Dotson and Danny Brown for the future. Terry McLaurin's a star, but wide receiver is probably not a big enough need for them to spend, the assets it would take to get Brandon Aiyuk. And then like I think the Panthers kind of wrote this cautionary tale where you don't want to be a team where a year from now we're like, damn, you traded DJ Moore, Jalen Carter, and Caleb Williams for Bryce Young.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't want to do that. But I just assumed that if a Brandon Aiyuk trade was going to happen, it happens before the draft, when the 49ers can use that pick or picks. I mean, you're getting something for this season when you're Super Bowl contender, maybe even Super Bowl favorite based on some odds. So I just, once the draft passed, I figured you're kind of at the point of no return of Brandon Aiyuk, and the Bengals are kind of past the point of no return of T. Higgins, where you just got to see how it plays out and hope these guys come in and they do their jobs to the best of their abilities and try to use that as a springboard to free agency, because that could be a win-win for both sides.
Yeah. So I think, tracking those situations will be interesting. I do think that given the age of these guys, they're both 24. So like we still have
crazy. It just seems like they're older. Like if you're like we talked about the Commanders, you talked about, I'm not trying to give up multiple firsts, but let's say the price is a first and a third or a second or something like that.
Aiyuk just turned 26. Sorry, I was off on that.
26. But even then, you still have 3-4 really, really good years left with one of the top 15 receivers in the NFL. And look, draft picks don't work out sometimes. We talked about AJ Brown for Treylon Burks. You don't think Titans would want to reverse that? Like I think that investing in players really is underrated at times. I mean, these teams hold on to draft picks like they're gold, and I get it, cheap labor, salary cap, blah, blah, blah. But if you're giving me a chance, any of these teams, any top 10 team, or even any team, any of the other 31 teams, if you have a realistic shot at Brandon Aiyuk and you're not giving up the world of draft picks for him, you got to think about it, because whoever you get in a draft, I mean, Roma Dunze or Malik Neighbors, so they're no guarantee to be as good as Brandon Aiyuk, right? Like, so I get why those teams drafted those guys, and they should have, and all that. But I'm just saying, hey, if you got a chance, if the 49ers really are serious that they might trade Brandon Aiyuk, I think every team should be on the phone, including even a team like the Commanders, where you're right, it's probably a multi-year rebuild for them.
Yeah, I know. This is where I wish sometimes the in-division trades were a little bit more frequent. Although, like, if I was the 49ers, I would never do this. But wouldn't it be fun to see Brandon Aiyuk on the Rams with Sean McVay?
Oh, man.
God,
oh, man.
you know,
oh,
like,
man.
if I'm the Rams, like, hey, they were trying to trade up for Brock Bowers. This is another yak guy like that. But, you know,
they're always aggressive. I mean, the Chargers are the team that comes to mind for me. Like,
that's a good one.
You don't have to trade them into division. You're not even trading them into conference. The Chargers desperately need somebody to kind of grow with Justin Herbert at the receiver spot after Quentin Johnston kind of really didn't look good his rookie year. But there's a lot of any team I could give you. I could be like, what about the Detroit Lions? Like, they're in a Super Bowl window, and Jameson Williams is probably a better number 3 than a number 2. Like, any team I could throw out to you probably makes some sense, because he's Brandon freaking Aiyuk. He's awesome, and every team could use him, including the 49ers, and that's why I don't think they trade him, because they are closer to a Super Bowl with Brandon Aiyuk than they are trading him.
Yep, for sure. That's about all the transaction news we got. We do have some Hard Knocks news, which is interesting, because it seems like I gotta say, I'm not totally sure on all the options we have this year, because it seems like there's gonna be 3 different iterations of Hard Knocks. I know the Giants have one for the offseason. Then there's the one that just got announced was the AFC North,
which is in season, if I'm correct.
In season, yes. And then there's one more, I think, for late season.
The training camp. Isn't there a training camp? We still got the traditional.
Okay. It's off season with the Giants.
Which is so dusty right now. What do you think of Hard Knocks overall? Like, I'm just kind of out. Like, the training camp one, I'm like, whatever.
I will say, I was with you. And just to be clear, we have off season Hard Knocks with the Giants, training camp Hard Knocks with the Bears, and then in season Hard Knocks with the entire AFC North. Yeah, I was out on Hard Knocks until last year. And the only reason why, like, I still tune into Hard Knocks every once in a while is, honestly, I'd just be bored as hell at home. And I'll just be like, all right, what is this?
What a review. They're going to put that on the commercial. Like, I turn it on when I'm bored as hell at home. Charles McDonald, Yahoo Sports.
Yeah. So, it's like 10:15. Maybe you're not quite ready to go to bed. Yeah, I'll turn on some Hard Knocks. And normally over the past few years, it hasn't been a very interesting experience, I would say. But they did reel me back in a little bit with that Dolphins in season 1. I thought that was pretty
good.
strong.
It was good. Mike McDaniel's awesome.
Yeah. I would actually, I don't really find Hard Knocks all that interesting anymore. I think obviously the league got concerned with how they were being portrayed a little bit, and it got dumbed down, which is crazy, because we all know that football players and coaches are crass and crude, and it's a violent game. So, like, just show us that it's fine. Like, fine. Before Hard Knocks, was I really supposed to believe that Rex Ryan was like the most straight edge guy around? Come on.
There's a reason. Yeah, there's a reason for Rex Ryan. On Hard Knocks, right? It's not because he's going to be playing the guitar and all this stuff. Like, I just find Hard Knocks to be so formulaic. The training camp one. There's going to be the undrafted, long-haired linebackers just trying to make the team. And then there's this free spirit dude who's, again, playing like acoustic guitar in the dorms. It's just like the same tripe all the time. And I'm like, the in-season one, I actually find much better because there's things happening. Like with the Dolphins last year, with them dealing with some injuries they had or getting ready for this team or that team. I think it's a much better show. It gets no hype, but it's a much better show. And I'm really interested to see this off-season one, because it could be the best Hard Knocks season we've had, or just garbage, because it just depends how honest they are with the access and how true they are to what really is going on. And the Giants we've talked about this with Jory and I and Fitz. If you're in the room, well, they're talking trade with the Patriots for number 3 and getting, hey, yes, we want Drake May for these reasons. That kind of behind the scenes stuff, it's going to be amazing. Mm-hmm. If it's just we drafted Malik Neighbors and he's awesome, and here's him in his apartment like that, I don't have any desire for that. So
yeah.
But the one thing about the in season, how do you follow 4 teams at once if you're the AFC North? I assume they have a plan for it, and 4 great teams is a fun division, but I don't know how they really follow 4 teams at once on the same season.
Neither do I. And I think what made the Dolphins Hard Knock season, like if you're a football fan and you have some time to kill before preseason starts, I would recommend watching that. And I think what made it so good is the Dolphins, they really did not seem to care that HBO was on facilities. Like they were
totally agree. They agreed a lot of stuff they were moving that I was surprised about. Yeah.
They were moving as if the cameras were not there. And I think being a high profile team, and you said the injuries, like I think the episode that really kind of brings it together is unfortunately the one after Jalen Phillips tears his Achilles. And, you kind of get to see like the heart and soul of that team. And I thought that was actually pretty well done. But, that's like, have you ever seen the meme where it's like Chris Paul and it's a screenshot of a YouTube screen? It says Chris Paul hits 3, cut lead to 40. Like that's kind of how the Dolphins Hard Knocks was. You still got a lot of ground to make up. So like I wouldn't be stunned if like any of these new series are duds, but I'm a little bit more inclined to check it out after how the Dolphins went.
Yeah, me too. I agree. If you guys have not watched the Dolphins Hard Knocks, go watch it. It's rare to get a really honest look at the inner workings of an NFL team, especially during the season, because these teams treat all of everything they do so secretively. I make the joke all the time that they think they're another branch of the military when they're not. They're an entertainment business. So to see that, I think it's just Mike McDaniel. He doesn't care. Like he's fine, well, whatever. Put it on HBO. I really don't care. It was one of the better seasons in a long time. I totally agree.
All right. You know what? We have one breaking important topic to get to before we get to an ad break. We're going to talk about teams who are in rough shape for this year. Joe DeLeon, who is helping produce this podcast today, recently completed his fantasy football loser punishment, which was sitting in a McDonald's for 24 hours, for up to 24 hours. And depending on what you eat or what activities you finish while you're in McDonald's, time gets docked off. I have my own story of eating way too much McDonald's in a single setting. But Joe, if your mic is working, I just wanted to ask you, how is your stomach feeling today? And how much did you actually eat?
So it was long enough ago that I actually feel pretty good. The full total, 7,000 calories.
Oh.
It was 2 big breakfasts with hot cakes.
Oh,
took off 2 hours of time each. 17 hash browns, 23 apple packets, and 4 McChickens. That was the full total.
Oh my God,
my dear God!
Not proud of it. I'm not proud of it.
Lord.
Are you like
here? That's all I'm gonna say, man. We're happy you're still here.
Are you at the point where you like are not going to eat McDonald's for several years now?
Oh yeah. Well, I like fast food, but I'm not a big McDonald's guy. Like I'll go like on a road trip, but I'm telling you right now, like 5 years minimum, I'm not going back to a McDonald's. Just the atmosphere of being there as long as I was, I don't think I could set foot in one of those again. There's no way.
Okay, now this is where I actually have a relation to you on this front. Because when I was in college, freshman year on the football team, we had an encouraged challenge where 2 freshmen on the team each had to eat 100 McNuggets in an hour.
An hour?
An hour.
100 in an hour.
An hour. And all you got was one red Solo cup filled to the top with water. No sauces, nothing like that.
Sauce? Oh my God.
And I promise you, to this day, for the Gettysburg College football team, I still have the record of most McNuggets eaten in an hour with 89.
89. Wow.
Yeah.
So not to be TMI, did you just throw up afterwards?
No, I didn't throw up. I didn't eat for almost like 3 days after that. It just sat in my stomach like a rock. But I was gonna tap out because I was like, this is so unhealthy. This is dumb. And then I had my friend who outweighs me by like 100 pounds. He had the previous record of 88. He weighed like 340 when we were in college. He was like, oh, you can't beat my record. I was like, you know what? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. And I'm going to because you showed me how much you care about this. So I ate 89. I called it. I lived 2 blocks from where we had the challenge. And I had to get driven home. It was awful.
I'm just stunned you did it in an hour. Like if you told me this was just like a sitting and you did it for like a 4-hour outing or something like that, how did you do it in an hour? That is the crazy part.
That is like some Joey Chestnut.
Right.
There, man.
Once I got to 77, I remember I was like dunking them whole.
I love how he remembers the specific numbers. By the way,
did you never forget that kind of pain?
Yeah, right. I was going to say you sit through this. You remember it.
Go ahead. Go ahead, C-Mac. Go ahead.
I was dunking them in the water towards the end. Like once I got close to 80 and just swallowing them whole, like just straight out of pride. And then I skipped classes for 2 days just because I was like too sick to go do anything.
Yeah, that's why you skipped class. Yeah, it's me too.
Was this an
I never skipped class besides that.
Was this an off-season activity or was this like a training camp? Like when did you do this?
It was after the season was over.
Okay.
So this is like winter 2012. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a long time ago.
That's I would watch. I legitimately would watch a 30 for 30 on that.
Oh yeah, on the whole ordeal.
Nuggets experience. Yeah, 89 Nuggets.
Somewhere
That would be the title. 89 Nuggets.
All right, I just need to check and make sure you were okay, and let you know that you're not alone on the repulsive McDonald's eating stories. When it's forced down to you, sometimes you got to do it. But I didn't eat McDonald's for like 6 or 7 years after that. It was.
I don't blame you. I appreciate you letting me know that I'm not the only crazy person who's done this, because I think some people thought that I was doing some undefeatable challenge, but I mean, football players, we find ways to do stupid things with fast food all the time. It's a common occurrence.
The funniest part, I'll tell us before we get to an ad break. So it was me and my friend. We went to McDonald's, right? And because the seniors, they gave us a cash for it, and they're like, "All right, you guys got to go pick it up." So we go there, and we're like, "Hey, we need 2 separate orders of 100 McNuggets." And the guy who was like, in the back, like he heard me up front, and he turned around. He's like, "Did you say 200 McNuggets?" I was like, "Yeah, I did. I did say 200 McNuggets. If you could get that out to me." And then it took like 5 minutes, which is the gross part. All right. Thanks, Joe. We'll be back with Team Tour in bad shape for 2024 after a word from our sponsors. All right. We're back. We just talked about making our bodies into bad shape. Let's talk about teams who are in some rough shape for 2024. And we're just going to kind of, we're not really going to make picks on the over-under because I think there's just so much time left. There's still some moves to make. Rosters are going to be tinkered. But just like to give you a snapshot on where, BetMGM sees where some of these teams are. We're going to start with the Carolina Panthers, who just briefly made fun of in the last segment for trading away all those picks for Bryce Young, and picks who have already turned out to, or assets who have already turned out to be like some pretty important pieces. Jalen Carter was picked with their original pick from last year. Gave away DJ Moore, who our coworker Nate Tice said he would have had him as second team All-Pro wide receiver if he had votes last year. And then Caleb Williams, who was seen as maybe a transcendent quarterback prospect. So I think what's interesting is like when you miss on a pick like that, you kind of have to start overcorrecting, or not miss, but like you miss on the investment for sure. You kind of have to start overcorrecting in a way where I don't know if like how much better you actually are, but you are better. So you go give Robert Hunt $100 million to play guard for you. You sign Damian Lewis to solidify your other guard spot. You go get Deontay Johnson. Like they're moving in the right direction. BetMGM has them at 5.5. I think that probably sounds about right. And if they're a lot worse than 5.5 wins, we might see another one and done, because I just don't see how David Tepper is going to tolerate this, given his track record to this point.
Yeah, and you waited till the end to say the 2 words that matter most to the Carolina Panthers in 2024 and beyond. David Tepper, like, how can they win with this guy? He's just kind of running this franchise into the ground. And I talk a lot about previews because that's all that's on my mind these days. But my first preview came out, the Carolina Panthers, number 32 today. And I led by saying, what do you do as a fan of a team when you have the worst owner in your sport? what do Panthers fans do? You can't trade David Tepper. It's not like, even if Bryce Young stinks, you could say, well, in 3 years, we'll get another quarterback. We'll be fine. Like all these things can be corrected except ownership. And to this point, he's been really, really bad. I mean, to your point of, the funny thing is, I wrote about this a couple weeks ago. The only win total in the entire NFL that has moved in a positive direction this offseason is the Carolina Panthers. It opened at 4.5. It went to 5.5. And so I think there's some optimism that all these improvements the Panthers made to their interior of their line, to the getting Deontay Johnson, who's a legit guy. They drafted a startable running back, a startable receiver in the first round, and a tight end who could start for them right away. So you see the progress they're trying to make. But at the same time, I just think their ceiling is going to be limited by having such a bad owner. We saw this in the Daniel Snyder era with Washington, where you just can't overcome a guy who is making these rash, impulsive decisions. And if it's not just, Dave Canales, who might be one and done. Like, if Bryce Young struggles this year, you think David Tepper's going to have him back for a third year? I don't know. Yeah. Like, it's crazy, but maybe not. Any other team, I would think, yeah, you're going to see this through with Bryce, but with him, maybe not. I just don't know. I just think it all stems from ownership. And until David Tepper kind of changes his ways, mellows out, doesn't go harassing bar owners for signs they're putting up before the draft as he did a couple months ago, I just don't think this Panthers team could get off the ground. It's a depressing place to be if you're a Panthers fan.
It's tough. I think the most disheartening thing to me if I was a Panthers fan is like, man, the NFC South was that bad last year. We didn't really compete. Like, I know you got one against the Falcons at the end of the season, but outside of that, 2 games by 4 points combined.
Yeah. 2 2-point wins. That's all they had. They were that close to going 0-17, which is unbelievable in the modern NFL.
I agree. It's pathetic, really. And the fact that, a division where the division winner, like, it was about to be, like, there was a chance with like 2 weeks left that the 7-10 Falcons could have won the division. And you only won 2 games with that. Like, you are really, really, really far away. And unfortunately for Bryce Young, like, this is where things, I think, sometimes like are not his fault, or really, I should say, this is where things become the team's fault over the player's fault. It's like, maybe he just shouldn't have been the first overall pick, and
maybe
he shouldn't have traded for him.
Well, he shouldn't have been. CJ Stroud obviously should have been. I mean, now in retrospect, but I just don't know what to make. Are you out on Bryce Young? I don't even know what to make of him. He showed almost nothing last year, right? Except the Packers game. Go back and look at the Packers game. He actually looked pretty good, but he showed almost nothing. But yet, how could he have succeeded in that environment? Right. Like, it was awful in every single way. Coach getting fired midseason, no talent around him. His number 1 receiver was Adam Thielen. Adams had a great career, but he shouldn't be a number 1 anymore. I mean, Jonathan Mingo absolutely flopped. Like, stuff like that, where it's like, I'm not impressed with Bryce Young right now, and especially with Stroud going right after him, really, really stings. But how could you make any judgments on Bryce Young? Where are you at with him? Do you think there's hope for him? Because I liked him 8 months ago or whenever the season started, and then it just went all downhill from there.
I'm not like fully out on him, but I will say I'm probably out on the idea that he becomes like a high impact starter, just because I think we've seen it. Here's what I feel about it. I think I said it last week with Nate, where I think 2 things are true. Bryce Young was set to fail horrendously last year. The Panthers, they way overestimated how good they were before they made that trade to go number 1 for him. They were not ready to do that. Horrible job of self-scouting. They weren't ready to make that move, but here they are. I also think that we probably would have seen it a little bit more, maybe, like just some more glimpses. And people will say, oh, CJ Stroud, he wouldn't have been as good in the Panthers offense. Obviously, I think that's like obviously true. But I think we might have seen a little bit more. So, I think I just feel differently about his ceiling. Could he still be like Alex Smith level good? Probably. I think that's like a reasonable expectation for him now. But like to say I have the same expectations of like a normal number 1 overall pick after seeing last season, I just don't. I don't. But let's just see if he can get off the ground this year. And it just
start like actually to add, right. To add real quick, I mean, the reason they made that trade is David Tepper, because everybody in that building knows that if you don't fix the quarterback situation, you're going to get fired. Like, there's no patience. Fitterer, who was a GM at the time, couldn't exactly go to David Tepper and say, like, you talk about self-scouting and not knowing where you're at. I think they knew where they were at, But Fitterer knew he can't go to David Tepper and be like, hey, boss, we need to wait a year. Caleb Williams coming out. We could draft a quarterback next year. I don't want to give up DJ Moore and 18 million picks. But he knew that you can't, that wasn't even an option because David Tepper is going to be like, well, then I'm going to fire you. It's just everything stems from David Tepper being a terrible owner. And that's why the Panthers are in the spot they're in.
I think David Tepper has too much money to be an NFL owner. Too much.
He might. Like, he's one of these guys who you make a ton. I get it. There's no training ground for NFL ownership. Like, there's no you work your way up. You either get the team because your dad owned it, or you make a ton of money in another business and then you buy a team. I think just the things that worked for him in that realm, in the finance world, just doesn't translate to this world, and he hasn't figured that out
yet. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with the Panthers, but last year was not great. Doesn't look too promising, but hey, it's better than it was last year. Give him that.
Yes.
It's better than it was last year. The Commanders, they're in a similar boat as the Panthers. I think they're a little bit better. Their over-unders at 6.5. They went 2-15 last year, or 4. No, they went 4-13 last year.
A little
2-15 for the
better.
Panthers.
4-13, I believe.
So 6 wins is doable. And I would say that I think 6 wins is doable because of the state of the NFC East, mostly. The Cowboys, I think they sat on their hands this offseason for whatever reason, and they're just going to play out 2024 and see what happens and keep it moving forward after that. The Giants are in rebuild mode. The Eagles are still like the standard of that division, but the Commanders could come around here and mess around and split their series or even go 2-0 against the Giants or the Cowboys. I think 6 wins is attainable. It's really just all about like, how does Jaden Daniels look? Because they have some skill talent. The offensive line's a mess, but I do think that like 6 wins should be in reach for this team.
I get in trouble every offseason because I just get on some idea and I can't let it go. And I just keep digging my hole deeper and deeper. And my hole this year might be that I think the Commanders could be a playoff contender. I know that sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy. I've talked about this. Anybody who asks me, I always bring up the Commanders. Nobody thought in 2012 that the Commanders were going to win the NFC East, right? Like, we just don't see these things coming. But they draft a kid, 2nd overall, Heisman Trophy winner, great dual threat quarterback, comes in, invigorates everybody. And I look at, that was RG3. This time is Jaden Daniels, who I think is a heck of a quarterback. If he can stay healthy, I think just his legs alone, his athleticism could lead him to have a successful rookie year. We've seen guys, look, passing in the NFL is hard as a rookie quarterback, but the athleticism doesn't leave. And he's such a dynamic talent that way, and a good passer too, that he could have. Look, Lamar Jackson had a pretty good rookie year when he had the second half there and made the playoffs. Like, it happens for guys like this sometimes. And I think about the Commanders, most roster turnover in the NFL this offseason. They got a coach in Dan Quinn who was coveted by other teams, but always stayed with the Cowboys. He was waiting for the perfect job. Adam Peters, a lot of respect around the league. He could have got any GM job he wanted for a while. These guys wanted to go to the Commanders, and I think people see the untapped potential. Now Daniel Snyder's out of the picture. They're spending money in free agency. They had a good draft. Other than even Daniels, they got a lot of good picks. I just think this team is a team that we might look up in November, and either one of two things is going to happen. We might look up in November and say, yeah, this is one of those teams that just blows the doors off everybody, surprises everybody. Or we're looking up in November and saying, I'm really, really dumb for thinking the Commanders could be good this year. It's one of the two. I don't know, Steve-Mac. I've been wrong, spectacularly wrong before, so I'm not afraid of it. But I see the potential in this Commanders team and could think they could be that team that we're just blown away. Like, wow, where did they come from?
Yeah, the only thing that really gives me pause is I'm not sold on the Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury combo.
I don't love Kingsbury. That is tripping me up. I can't lie to you. It is tripping me up.
Yeah, and I say this from watching, what was it, 7 years of DQ being the head coach in Atlanta, plus, or maybe it was 6 years. Well, it doesn't matter. Plus, like how their playoff runs in Dallas have ended the past few years. It's like when they run into one of those offensive guys who can think a little bit, they just get shredded. Every single time they just get destroyed. So I think Dan's like a good coach, but I also think he's a guy, like, when it comes to schematics, he's a little overly reliant on like the player talent available to them, which maybe is where they get a little hitched up this year. But man, like I don't really see why the Commanders couldn't come out at least like from the bottom of the NFC East.
Oh yeah, Giants are worse. I had one of the mistakes. Look, when I do these previews, I'm going to talk about previews a lot because again, I'm in this world in my head. When I did the previews, I had the Giants ranked ahead of the Commanders, and I spent a lot of extra time researching and writing and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, I made a big mistake. The Commanders are way better than the Giants. Giants are finishing last. Like the Giants are finishing last in the NFC East. I am fully confident in that. No matter how good the Commanders are, I don't know, but they're going to be better than the Giants. I'll tell you that.
The next one, and we're going to stay in the division here. Actually, we're going to do the New York Giants. They are also at 6.5. This feels, I mean, it kind of feels okay because I still like Dable in some of the things that they do, but and we'll see it with the in-season or the off-season Hard Knocks that launches pretty soon. But man, we all know they wanted a quarterback. We all know they were trying to move up for Drake May. They didn't get it done. I wouldn't really say Malik Neighbors is settling. Maybe it kind of feels like settling when Daniel Jones is your quarterback, even though he's a great young player. 6 wins, it seems appropriate, but I just kind of struggle to see like where the juice is on offense outside of Neighbors. Like it just kind of feels like they're walking into a situation where Neighbors is going to has to be their only real explosive threat that scares teams. And that's a tough place to be for a rookie. Saquon Barkley's with the Eagles. Darren Waller just retired, even though he didn't do too much last year. So you're kind of looking at like Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, maybe Jalen Hyatt becomes something. I don't know. I just don't think this offense has a whole lot of juice. And that's where I kind of get worried about them potentially hitting this win total. I feel better on defense just because they do have some front seven talent. I mean, dude, Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns. I think Kayvon Thibodeau is wasn't quite as good as the sack number said last year, but like if he's your third best defensive lineman, you're in a really, really good place. It's just more like how are they going to score? Because that seems like a really big question mark to me.
Yeah, and that's why I think this team could be a 4-win type of team. I just don't see it. Look, they caught so many breaks 2 years ago to make the playoffs, and that was fine, and that was good. Like, it's fun to make the playoffs. It's fun to win a playoff game, but I think it gave them a false sense of hope. Just, hey, we're further along than we are. No, you really weren't. Like, you caught a lot of close wins. You made the playoffs. You beat a similarly lucky Vikings team in the playoffs when you weren't really that good. You traded a top 100 pick for Darren Waller, which it kind of speaks to where their mindset was at. Ooh, we're close in the NFC East. You weren't. Like, it just, and then I think the true level of the Giants was last year. We saw them get blown out in a lot of games, like bad. Like, they were just a bad football team. And now they're relying on a quarterback who is coming off a torn ACL. I don't think he gets better coming off of that injury. Look, maybe Malik Neighbors is going to be rookie year Odell Beckham. Maybe this defensive line is going to be the best in football. It really could be. I mean, their defensive line's awesome. But, I mean, you've got a new coordinator on that side, Brian Daboll. Look, everything's fun. You know, Brian Daboll's fiery and he's yelling at guys. That's fun when you win. And when you lose, everybody's going to be backbiting you. And we saw that last year. Everybody was sick of Brian Daboll yelling at everybody. You saw that in the New York papers. I just don't, I don't see any reason for optimism with the Giants right now. I just don't. I don't, like you said, where's their juice on offense? And even if their defensive line is great, they still have a lot of questions in the secondary and all that. I don't like them. I don't like the Giants coming into this year at all.
Yeah, it's just tough, man. Like they've just put themselves in a situation where it's tough to see where the explosive plays come from. And I also think that this comes back to like a poor use of self-scouting where the year where Dable's first year where they won the playoff game in Minnesota, all the games, like they're fighting for their lives. Like they're scraping through at the very end. Like they're just barely beaten.
Lucky. They were so lucky to make it.
And then they played the Vikings, who were also an extremely lucky team that year, and they beat them on the road.
Seen, yeah.
Then they went. I remember. Then I covered this game. They go to Philadelphia to play the Giants.
Oh, and they were just a total zero. That game was one of the most forgettable playoff games on history.
I was there. I don't even remember the score. Yep. And I all I know is. What I do remember from that game is after like maybe the first 3 or 4 plays, I was like, oh, this game's over. Like they don't have a shot. But you know, I think teams fall into the trap, and I can see why you would, because you're the ones who are going through the motions and fighting through this stuff every single day, playing these games. They tend to overestimate where they are when they have a season like that. Like, okay, yeah, we made it to the divisional round, but we had a point differential of like 0 for the season. Yeah, you probably got some room got some room to improve. But instead, you give Daniel Jones a contract, you kind of double down, and now you're in a spot where you don't have as much flexibility as you might would have liked coming into this offseason, which is obviously going to hamper what's possible for the upcoming year. I just think, man, the offense is going to be tough to watch this year for them.
It could be the worst in the NFL if Daniel Jones still. If Daniel Jones doesn't have the running ability coming off the ACL. Like, what is he? Like, the one thing that's kind of kept Daniel Jones afloat is his ability to have value with his legs. And if he doesn't have that, I don't know what it is. We're going to see Drew Lock by midseason if he doesn't have that. Like, there's just no way around it.
Yeah, I've seen some. I've seen a few Giants fans that I still follow from my days at the newspaper. Every once in a while, tweeting about Drew Lock. I'm like, guys, this is not.
Yeah, no. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that.
This is not the game you want to play. It's like they're like, well, could Drew be better than Daniel Jones? Like, I mean, maybe.
Ooh,
like,
wow, great. He's better than Daniel Jones. Ooh.
Yeah, not a really high bar. Let's do a team that also has a pretty low bar for the season. Denver Broncos. They're at 5.5. Well, actually, let's juxtapose two teams. The Broncos are at 5.5 win total for the season. The Patriots are projected 4.5. And I don't really get why the Broncos would be higher than the Patriots, unless the Broncos just have an easier schedule.
Now, do you have a little bit of optimism in the Patriots, or is it just total Broncos?
No, it's more like me looking at the division the Broncos play in. It's like,
yeah.
Do you guys are they just going to get bloodbath, like playing in the AFC too? Because the AFC East is pretty tough too.
It is.
AFC East is pretty tough too. So maybe 4.5 is right.
I think the Patriots, I sometimes when I spend a lot of time researching, writing these teams, I was like, Patriots probably do finish with the worst record in the NFL. There's just not a lot of reason to look. They're doing everything they need to do in a rebuild, right? They got the coach who, we'll see. We have no idea what Jared Mayo is as a coach. I like Drake May. I think he's going to be good, but he's one of the rare first round rookie quarterbacks I just don't think should play this year because that situation is so bad around him. They really didn't do anything in free agency to help themselves. They had to, obviously spend a third pick of the draft on a quarterback who really shouldn't be playing right away because your situation's so bad, but you needed to do it. You needed to make the investment. So you didn't help yourself a ton in the draft that way by trading down or whatever. This is it's a rebuild that could take a couple of years. I'll tell you the difference though. I think the Broncos are one of the really, really rare teams that this might be a 5-year rebuild because 5-year rebuilds just don't happen in the NFL. I hate hearing, I always hear it still. Oh, you set yourself back a decade with that pick. No, you didn't. You set yourself back probably a year or two. Because if you have 1 or 2 good draft classes, you're totally fine. You rebuild in a hurry. Look at the Houston Texans. Denver Broncos are different, man. Like, we are talking about, they gave up 5 first and second round picks for Sean Payton and Russell Wilson. Like, think about that roster with 5 first and second round picks on it, right? Like, that should be the nucleus of your team, and they got nothing out of that, right? Because Wilson's a 0 and Payton's obviously not on the field. Great coach, but he's not on a roster. And then the salary cap hits at Russell Wilson set them back so far. You can't really sign anybody in free agency this year. You're going to have a tough time signing anybody in free agency next year. It is just a mess. And I honestly sit here and wonder all the time, is Sean Payton in? Like, is he in for this? Like, he kind of had to come out of the Fox broadcast booth, but the studio to take this job because they offered you so much money. But is he, like, if he gets 2 more years down the road and Bo Nix stakes and he's just probably going to bounce, right? Like, what? Like, I don't know why Sean Payton would deal with this nonsense because this is the one. I think if we're talking about the 2024 season, who's worse between the Broncos and Patriots? I think it'll be the Patriots. I think they could have the worst record in the NFL. If you're asking me right now, who has the worst 3-year outlook in the NFL? It's by far the Broncos. I think that they are in the mud right now, and it is not going to be easy to get out of it.
Well, I really did not like the Bo Nix pick because I just don't think that that's the kind of talent you need to lock yourself into, like with a first round pick. Because that's Sean's guy now,
Yeah. I think if Bo Nix doesn't work out, that's going to be Sean Payton just being like, I'm out. Like he did with the Saints. He stuck around 1 more year, and he's like,
he's put a lot of pressure on Nix too with some of the statements that he's been saying, like about how good he is and how everything's going perfectly. Like, okay, and also
it could fit well. And it could fit well. And if Bo Nix hits like Sean Payton thinks he might, or at least is saying he thinks he might, then maybe it's not a bad 3-year outlook because a quarterback changes everything, right? If you have a good quarterback with a really, really good coach, as Sean Payton is, sure, things look rosier. But Man, I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know really the Broncos' path out of this thing. Any other team, like whatever, you could have a Houston Texans type of offseason. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. With the Broncos, I'm not even sure that's really on the table for them right now.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. It's just like, man, you're going after Mahomes and Harbaugh Chargers with Bo Nix. Seems tough. We talked about owners that have a lot of money. Broncos ownership, a lot of money. So if this thing doesn't work out this year, like that's one of the things. They won't even feel paying like Sean Payton checks to not work there. You know, that's couch change for Walmart family.
That's true. Very, very true. Yes. But trust me, I'm based in Colorado, obviously lived here 20 some years. And Broncos fans are they're so beaten down. Like they have paid such a price for that Super Bowl win that, honestly, the gods got them back, right? Like they should have probably won 2012, 2013. They had the type of team that could have won. 2015 probably wasn't the type of team that could have won, but they won anyway with Peyton Manning and his 69 passer rating. And they have paid such a price for that karma. Like it's just depressing. These Broncos fans are just like, oh, they're just so like out. They're praying Bo Nix is good. Just have something to root for.
The last team we're going to talk about is my least favorite team in the NFL, New Orleans Saints.
I put this on the list for a reason. Charles, I threw you a bone. No, let's talk real quick. We're going to talk about the, who's got the worst situation in the NFL this year. And I made the request for the Saints, not because of you. I'm joking about that because we all know you love the Falcons and hate the Saints. But it's because when I was, again, writing previews, I'm going to mention this 19 dozen times, is that when I was right, it's just like, wow, the Saints they're not bad, but they're in such a bad spot as far as NFL teams go. And let me explain. Nobody remembers the Saints had a winning record last year. They were 9-8. They were not bad. And they're not going to be bad again this year. But that's almost the worst place to be in the NFL. What's the ceiling for this team? Like, is there any possible way there's even a non-0% chance that Derek Carr's leading the Saints to a Super Bowl? And the answer is no, they're not. But they could go 9-8. You kind of talk yourself into it. Ooh, we'll bring Dennis Allen back. We can't fire him. He just had a winning record. Oh, maybe if we add this or that, we could be better. They're just stuck in this really, really mediocre spot. And so, the team we brought up that we might have talked about, if you were to say, who do you think is going to have a better record this year, the Saints or the Cardinals? I'd probably say Saints. Like, they're not bad. They're middle of the road, and Cardinals have some ways to go, especially on defense. But if you're asking me, who would I rather be a fan of right now, the Cardinals or the Saints, thinking about the next few years? Easily the Cardinals. No question about it, because there's just no hope for the future for the Saints. They're just a really, really boring team that's going nowhere, has no chance to win a Super Bowl anytime soon. They're kind of stuck with this 33-year-old quarterback that Saints fans really haven't warmed up to it all, and just kind of middle of the road. Their roster's middle of the road. Their two biggest cap hits this year are on Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. Like, come on. Like that's how this team is built. This Saints team, again, they probably win 8 or 9 games because that's about the range they're in. And if I'm a Saints fan, I'm just like, oh, I have no juice for this team whatsoever. Like, how can I get excited to root for this team? Not just this year, but what's to come? Because there's just no ceiling here at all with this group.
I don't know. The Derek Carr one was baffling because, like, dude, you just have to take your medicine at some point.
And they never have.
Yeah.
CMAC, they keep doing this. This has been their MO for a decade of, we have all these salary cap problems, but let's get the credit card out and push it forward to 2 years from now. They did it this year. They were 80-some million over the cap at some point this offseason. But instead of just being like, yes, you're right. Instead of just being like, you know what? Let's just take our medicine for a year. Let's not sign Derek Carr to a $150 million deal. Let's just tear it all down. Let's trade Chris Olave and trade Marshawn Lattimore and all. They keep talking themselves into, well, maybe we could win the NFC South. Like, big deal. Like, who cares if you do? Like, you at some point want to build a team to where you can have a hope for a Super Bowl if everything breaks right. And the Saints just don't have that hope. And I'm not talking in 2024. I'm talking 2024, 2025, 2026. What's your path to that Super Bowl? And it's just not there for the Saints team. So we're talking about worst situations in the NFL this season. They're not going to have a bad record, but I wouldn't want to be a Saints fan right now. I just think it's a bad place to be.
Yeah. Like their outlook would be so much healthier if they had just said, we're not going to do the Derek Carr, we're not going to do the Jimmy G, Aaron Rodgers type deal. We're just going to push it one season with Jameis Winston as a quarterback, keep it moving. Okay, I kind of think that Jameis Winston could put up the same season as Derek Carr for like
why not? For way less money too. Yeah, he would check it down a lot less, throw more interceptions, but at least they have some exciting moments. Like, you get on the Jameis roller coaster for a year, fine, whatever. It's better than Derek Carr dumping it off to Alvin Kamara 28 times a game.
Yes, it would look different. I think maybe the total output might be the same in the end in terms of like efficiency, but you probably have more fun with James and would be a lot less expensive. But yeah, dude, they have like a Cam Jordan has a big cap hit.
35 or 36.
Yeah,
like,
his play.
Their top three, you could make an argument that their three best defenders, probably Lattimore's in there too, but their three best defenders are 32 years old or more. Tyrann Mathieu, Demario Davis, Cam Jordan. Like, that's not a good place to be when your three best defensive players are 32 years old or older. Like, that's rough, man. And look, I'm kind of just sitting here just killing the Saints, but there's a few teams in this kind of middle ground where you're like, you're not good, but you're just fooling yourself into believing you could be better when you should just tear it down. Like, I'd much rather be the New England Patriots right now than the New Orleans Saints. And the Saints might win 4 times as many games as the Patriots this year. But what's the hope for the Saints? Like, you go 8-9. Okay, cool. Like, then what? It's almost better in the NFL to be so bad that you just have to have a come to Jesus moment of, okay, it's done. Let's just tear it all down, trade stuff for picks. Let's start over because we could rebuild in 2 years. It's not that impossible in the NFL.
Yeah, and being 8-9 is fine when you have the means to get better in the offseason. There's no reason to just keep hitting the reset button and retooling and maxing out these contracts just to go 8-9 or you max out at 9-8. Just to take your medicine for a year.
Right. And your only hope, really, Charles, is that, well, maybe the NFC South is terrible. Like, well, okay. Like, is that a long-term plan? Like, is that really what you write on a whiteboard at the beginning of the year? Hey, maybe the rest of the NFC South is going to be 8-9 along with us. Like, that's really not where you want to be. But that is New Orleans Saints who are just stuck. It is a bad situation to be in when you're just so middle of the road that you can't force yourself to admit, yeah, we stink and we need to just tear this down.
Yeah, and I think that the NFC South point is good because in the way that we look at outliers in terms of position where it's like, oh, this quarterbacks threw for 5,500 yards last season. He's probably not going to do that again next year. Probably going to regress a little bit to the mean. I would say that's probably true for the NFC South. Like, I would be surprised if we're in week 17 and we're looking at 7-9 teams that could potentially win the division. Like, I would just expect it to be a little bit better because, like, last year was a year where that division for NFL standards was like uncommonly bad.
Last 2 years, really.
Last 2 years, right. So I think probably going to see a little shift. Depending on what happens with the Buccaneers, depending on how healthy Kirk Cousins is, where the Panthers are moving in the right direction because, they're not a good team, but they're better than they were last year, at least on paper. So just a weird decisions, man, to just keep running it back with a team is not that good. Like, we all know.
Like, ask yourself this question: like if the New Orleans Saints were in the same division as Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, there's no way they would have the same plan, right? Like, it's all predicated on maybe we can make the playoffs. Okay, you're making the playoffs, hoping to make it like 9-8. Like, you're not doing anything special, and that's just, again, it's just a rough spot to be. And I get why teams do it too, because if the Saints completely tear the thing down and they go 2-15, everyone's getting fired. Like, it's not like you're going to Dennis Allen's going to get a pass. Like, they're going to be like, you went to a 15. We're rebuilding anyway. We're going to find somebody new. We're going to throw the bag at Ben Johnson or whatever. So I get why teams kind of approach things this way, but there needs kind of be an adult in the room to step up and say, you know what, guys, we're not good. We're just not good.
We're not good. We're just not good right now.
Don't keep pushing these cap hits down to the future, because what's the freaking point of all of it?
Yeah. I think it's going to do it for this episode of The Exempt List. I know you do because you've been talking about it. But before we get out of here, you want to plug what you're working on and where people can find the big projects you're working on right now?
Yeah, I mentioned it every single other minute on the show. Yes, the preview series has started. I count them down 32-1. Number 1 is revealed the day before the Hall of Fame game. So this takes you right through to the preseason. I spent a lot of time and effort and thought and take a lot of care into these previews. I try to just really get to know each team again, right? It's get reintroduced to these teams and studying them hard, and it gets me ready and excited for the season. And I hope you read them, because I truly believe, like, I'm proud of them. I hope you read them. I hope you like them. I enjoy doing them, and I hope that kind of shines through in the writing.
All right. So that's going to do it for this episode of The Exempt List. I'm Charles McDonald. You can find me on Twitter at 4verts. Thanks to producer Joe DeLeon and his very upset tummy for helping us out behind the glass. Thanks to Frank for coming on, and we will see you next Tuesday.